The target stood untouched, clean and mocking, while one shot after another from the Army's most elite snipers missed by inches. The air grew heavy with frustration as quiet laughter rippled behind them, because a frail, 77-year-old veteran was standing nearby, watching them fail. And no one believed he could do any better. The old man stood just a few steps behind the firing line, his posture slightly bent by time, but not by weakness. His gray hair caught the light, and deep lines cut across his weathered face like maps of every battle he had survived. A thin scar ran along his jaw, half hidden beneath a short, trembling beard, yet his eyes were steady, sharp, patient, and quietly alive with something the younger soldiers could not name. He said nothing as the snipers muttered and smirked, but inside him lived a confidence forged by decades of discipline, loss, and survival. Every breath he took was slow and deliberate, as if he were already measuring the wind, the distance, the truth behind all their failure. Anyone who looked closely could feel it. This was not a fragile old man. This was someone who had faced death so many times that it no longer had the power to make him flinch. And without a single word, he made everyone watching feel both curious and uneasy, because something about him suggested that the real test had not even begun yet. Long before the quiet firing range and the polished uniforms of modern soldiers, the old man had walked through places where the air itself tasted of fear and burning metal. He had been young once, his hands steady and unscarred, gripping a rifle as the ground trembled beneath exploding shells. Back then, he had not known what it meant to grow old. He had only known what it meant to survive. In those days, the smell of gunpowder clung to his clothes like a second skin. Even now, decades later, it still lived somewhere deep in his memory, sharp, bitter, and unforgettable. Every time he closed his eyes, he could almost hear it again, the thunder of distant artillery, the frantic shouts of soldiers calling for medics, the hollow silence that followed when too many voices went quiet at once. Those were the sounds that never truly left him. He had served with men who became more than brothers. They shared stolen cigarettes in muddy trenches, whispered about home under cold, starless skies, and promised one another they would all make it back. Most of them never did. One by one he watched their faces fade into stillness, their dreams swallowed by war. He carried their names with him, long after their bodies were gone, like invisible metals heavier than anything pinned to his chest. The rifle he now held felt different from the ones he once carried, but his hands remembered. They were worn and scarred, fingers stiff with age. Yet every callus told a story of long hours on the range, of endless training, of discipline hammered into muscle and bone. Those hands had steadied themselves in moments when fear threatened to take over, when a single mistake meant someone else would never go home. Inside him lived both pride and grief, pride for having served, and grief for those who had paid the price. He did not speak of it, but the weight of those memories shaped everything he was. It was why he stood so calmly now, watching younger men struggle. To him, a missed shot was never just a mistake. It was a reminder of how much precision, patience, and respect for the craft truly mattered. The younger soldiers barely acknowledged the old man's presence as they prepared for another round of testing. Their uniforms were crisp, their equipment shining with the promise of the latest military technology. The new scopes mounted on their rifles were sleek, expensive, and packed with digital features that claimed to calculate wind, distance, and movement faster than any human ever could. To them, this technology was the future, and the future had no room for a quiet old veteran standing in the background. A few of them glanced over their shoulders, barely hiding their amusement. Some whispered to one another, smirks tugging at the corners of their mouths. What could a man with shaking hands and decades old experience possibly teach soldiers trained on machines that could see farther and think faster than any human eye? To them, he was a relic, a living museum piece, respected perhaps in stories, but irrelevant in the world of modern warfare. And yet, one by one, their shots kept missing. The targets downrange remained stubbornly untouched, their painted circles unbroken. The digital displays on the scopes flickered, recalculating again and again, as if confused by their own failures. Each miss tightened the air around the firing line. Frustration crept into the soldiers' movements, their breaths growing shorter, their grips on their rifles more tense. They adjusted their stances, recalibrated the technology and tried again, but the results were always the same. Failure. The old man watched quietly. He did not laugh. He did not shake his head. He simply observed, his eyes following every bullet's path as it drifted just a little too far to the left or dropped just a fraction too low. Where the soldiers saw numbers and glowing readouts, he saw something else, the subtle dance between wind and distance, the way the air itself could nudge a shot off course if it was not respected. To the officers overseeing the exercise, the technology was supposed to be the great equalizer. It was designed to remove human error, to make every shot perfect. But with each missed target, that promise began to crack. Their confidence in the equipment wavered, even as they continued to insist that the fault lay with the shooters, not the machines. Still, no one turned to the veteran. He stood there, a quiet contradiction to everything they believed. His rifle was simpler, heavier, and far less impressive than the sleek weapons the soldiers carried. There were no glowing screens, no digital calculations, just metal, wood, and a scope that relied on the human eye and steady hands. In a world obsessed with innovation, he represented something dangerously outdated: experience. The moral tension hung thick in the air. On one side was the Army's faith in modern technology, in progress, in the idea that machines could replace the hard-earned instincts of a human being. On the other side was the silent presence of a man who had survived real battles, where there were no second chances and no digital readouts to blame. Some of the younger soldiers began to feel it too, though none of them said it out loud. A quiet doubt crept into their thoughts. If the technology was truly so perfect, why did it keep failing? And if it kept failing, what did that say about everything they had been taught? The old veteran remained still, his expression calm but unreadable. He had seen this kind of arrogance before, not just in machines, but in men who believed that new tools made them invincible. He knew better. War had taught him that no amount of innovation could replace patience, discipline, and respect for the craft. As the snipers prepared for yet another attempt, the air between them and the old man felt charged with something more than frustration. It felt like a test, not just of accuracy, but of values. Experience stood quietly in the shadows, waiting while technology continued to stumble under the weight of its own promise. And deep down, whether they wanted to admit it or not, everyone on that firing line could feel it coming, a moment when silence would speak louder than any machine ever could. The pressure on the firing line kept growing. Every missed shot made the young soldiers more angry and more nervous. Some of them shook their heads. Some laughed in a low, rude way. A few even looked at the old veteran and smiled like he did not belong there. But the old man did not react. He stood still, calm and quiet, as if none of it touched him. His face did not change. His eyes stayed focused on the targets far away. To him, noise and jokes meant nothing. He had heard much worse in war. He had seen fear, pain, and death. A little disrespect was nothing compared to that. Slowly, he lifted his rifle. Not in a loud or proud way. Just gently, like someone holding something very precious. His old hands wrapped around the weapon with care. His fingers knew this shape. They had held rifles like this for most of his life. One of the officers noticed him. Just for a second. The officer saw how steady the old man's hands were. No shaking. Just quiet control. The wind moved softly across the field. The veteran closed his eyes for a moment. He was not sleeping. He was listening. He could feel the air on his skin. He could tell where the wind was moving and how fast. This was something no machine could feel. In the crowd, a young soldier also noticed him. This soldier had been watching closely. He had seen the misses. He had seen the old man's calm. Something about it felt different. Like a storm before it breaks. The veteran adjusted the rifle a little. Just a small movement. To others it meant nothing. But to someone who understood shooting, it meant everything. This was not a weak old man. This was someone getting ready. Everyone else was still busy with their screens and numbers. But they were missing something very important. The old man was about to show them what real skill looked like. The old man finally took his place at the firing line. For the first time all eyes were on him. He lifted the rifle slowly. His breath was calm. His face was quiet. The world around him felt far away. There was only the target now. He pulled the trigger. The shot went wide. It missed. For one long second, no one spoke. Then soft laughter started. A few young soldiers smiled. One young woman shook her head. Some of them laughed out loud. A 77-year-old man had just failed. They thought it was over. But the old veteran did not move. He did not look down. He did not look ashamed. He simply adjusted the rifle. Just a little. His eyes narrowed, his breathing slowed. The wind touched his face, and he felt it. Not with a screen, not with numbers, with instinct. He took the second shot. This time the bullet flew straight. It hit the center of the target. Perfect. The laughter stopped. No one spoke. Even the wind felt quiet. Some of the young soldiers stared at the target. Others looked at the old man. The same man they had laughed at only seconds before. Then he took a third shot. Another perfect hit. The officers stepped closer. Their faces changed. Shock, respect, something close to fear. The old man had not failed. He had measured. And now everyone knew it. The air felt different now. The tension that had gripped the field just moments before had melted into a profound stillness. Soldiers who had laughed, who had mocked, and who had doubted now stood frozen, their eyes wide and unblinking. The veteran had not only hit his targets with precision, he had delivered a lesson none of them would forget. Even the young officers, trained to evaluate performance with rigid metrics and digital readouts, were caught in a web of awe and respect. Some soldiers slowly lowered their rifles, unable to believe what they had witnessed. Their hands trembled slightly, not from fatigue, but from realization. They had seen age and experience triumph over speed, over technology, over arrogance. They had seen a silent man speak louder than anyone shouting. And for the first time that day, they understood that mastery is not measured by the newest tools, but by the patient, unwavering effort that comes from a lifetime of dedication. The crowd around the firing line shifted. Spectators who had come expecting a simple demonstration were now witnessing something far greater. People whispered to one another, their voices low, filled with awe. "Did you see that?" one said. "Hey, he didn't just hit the target. Hey, he taught us something." Children who had been fidgeting and playing grew still, staring with wide eyes. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, carrying away the dust kicked up by the bullets like a silent applause. The young woman who had laughed at the veteran's first failed shot now stood with her hand over her mouth, unable to hide her astonishment. Her earlier giggles felt miles away, replaced by a deep respect that had taken root instantly. The other soldiers glanced at her, then at each other, and slowly, a quiet acknowledgement passed among them. They had been proven wrong, and yet it was not humiliation they felt, it was understanding, and gratitude for the lesson delivered so subtly, so powerfully. The veteran himself remained calm. He did not raise his arms in victory, nor did he smile widely. His gaze swept across the field, taking in the silent respect of every person present. There was no pride in his expression, only a quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes when one has done exactly what was meant to be done, without need for recognition or applause. His life had been filled with battles, sacrifices, and lessons, and here, in this small, sunlit field, those experiences had spoken for themselves. He adjusted his coat slightly as he walked slowly away from the firing line, each step measured and unhurried. His movements told a story of discipline, endurance, and strength, the kind that does not fade with age. The crowd watched him go, realizing that what they had witnessed was more than just shooting skill. It was wisdom. It was patience. It was silent honor triumphing over arrogance and haste. Some of the young soldiers approached him cautiously. They did not rush. They did not speak at first. Their eyes, wide with newfound respect, silently conveyed everything they could not yet put into words. The veteran nodded gently, a subtle acknowledgement of their understanding. No one needed to shake hands, no one needed to speak. The moment was complete in its quiet dignity. The officers stepped forward, offering formal recognition in their own subdued way. Their voices were measured, careful. "Your skill, your patience, it has reminded us all what true mastery is," one said. Others nodded, some speechless. But even as they tried to articulate the lesson, it was clear that words alone could not capture what had been demonstrated. The veteran had taught something far deeper than a technical skill. He had shown them the value of experience, the power of calm, and the strength of silent resilience. Everywhere, spectators whispered. Some were moved to tears, some to quiet smiles. The moral victory was not just his, it belonged to everyone who had watched, felt, and reflected. In that sunlit afternoon, the line between youth and age, arrogance and humility, machine and human, had been blurred. The old veteran's presence, his calm, his decades of wisdom, had spoken volumes, leaving an imprint that would linger far longer than the sound of the bullets or the flicker of the targets. And as the crowd slowly dispersed, many paused to share their thoughts, some with awe, some with newfound respect. They would talk about this moment for years. They would remember it not for the technology that had failed, nor the initial laughter at a missed shot, but for the quiet hero who reminded them all that life's greatest victories are often silent, earned through patience, discipline, and unwavering honor. To the viewers at home watching this story unfold, from wherever you are, take a moment to reflect. How often do we underestimate the wisdom of experience? How often do we ignore the quiet strength of someone who has lived through trials we cannot imagine? Comment below and share where you're watching from. Let us know how this story touched you, or what lessons you carry from it. And if you want to see more stories that honor silent heroes, veterans, and unsung champions of courage, don't forget to subscribe and share this story with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of patience, experience, and honor. This is not just a story about a veteran, a rifle, or missed shots. This is a story about respect, about what it means to fight with dignity, about what it means to rise silently, stand tall against doubt, and remind the world that true mastery is never loud, never brash, it is steady, calm, and enduring. Even as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the field, the memory of those perfectly measured shots, the silence that followed, and the quiet awe of all who witnessed it would linger. Lessons like this are timeless. They are shared quietly, remembered forever, and honored silently, exactly like the man who delivered them.